What's up, guys, and welcome to another edition of Hockey Hub. Man, has it been a week. Between the moving out here to Hawaii and the Hurricanes going 4-0, it's been a fantastic week. The Hurricanes ended up defeating the Columbus Blue Jackets, the Washington Capitals, and the Philadelphia Flyers twice in this little stretch, and it feels good. It feels real good because I feel like compared to these last couple of weeks where we've had a lot of questions about who's our goaltender, when's Slavin coming back, what's going on with the offense. I feel like we've gotten a couple of answers, still a couple of question marks, but what's going on, especially with the first line. But for the most part, it feels great to know just the Hurricanes are back on their game, right? So with where we're sitting right now, we are 7 points ahead of the last place Metropolitan team, which was the Columbus Blue Jackets. So not even a week ago, we were only 3 points out from being not even in a playoff position. So seeing that change recently, that's happened. Seeing the Hurricanes really start the game is start kind of piecing together. It's been really great. With all that being said, let's go ahead and let's jump into it. Let's talk about some of the ins, the outs, and some of the big headlining stories right now with the Carolina Hurricanes. So I think we all know where we're starting, right? Brandon Bussi with an 11-1 record over his first 12 games, setting an NHL record. It feels good. It feels good to not have a question about goaltending right now. We've in the past, even with if you go back to, it just feels like it's been forever. It feels like it's been forever since we feel like we have a young goaltender who has a lot of promise. The only goaltender I can think of that ever come close to this is probably maybe Cam Ward. Where we sort of have him a little bit on the younger side. Where I know for a fact we're going to be locking him up here shortly. I think he's only on a 1 year deal from when he signed with the Florida Panthers. Excuse me, with the Boston Bruins before he went to the Florida Panthers. So I feel like this is all going to come together really nicely for the Hurricanes. If I'm the Hurricanes, what I'm doing first and foremost is I'm locking him up long term, and I'm giving him a Blake slash Stankoven ish type deal, right? Where it's like, hey, you're not right now. We're gonna pay you with give you a little extra, just to, not being so terribly sure what you're gonna become. I'd much rather pay him a little bit extra. I think a 5-6 year deal around the 6 million mark. I think that sort of kind of covers it. He becomes a well paid 1A goaltender for the Hurricanes. And what I think the Hurricanes should do, if and this is my personal opinion on the matter, right, is that I think that the Hurricanes should go out and sign both Bussy and sign Kochenkov. Kochenkov on a very similar deal to what we just signed. If we end up signing Bussy, a similar structured deal where it's 5-6 years, 5-6 million. Essentially having two goaltenders locked up in 1A, 1B, and say, hey, look, whoever wants the crease, that's how you're going to get the crease. This, as it stands, the league has sort of already started treading in this direction where we're seeing tandems being really important. Look no farther than the Boston Bruins just a couple years ago with Allmark and Swayman, right? And look how well that worked out for them. If we can sit down both of these goaltenders and say, look, neither one of you, both of you, if you guys work together, you can have each other's backs, and you guys can really make sure that we are bringing home a couple of cups in these next couple of years. Because as of right now, the biggest issue on this team, I feel like, is no longer goaltending, which I feel like it's been years since we've been able to say that. Not that Mrazek years or the first couple Anderson years weren't decent years in goaltending. I feel like there was always a little bit of a question mark around it, right? Because remember, Frederik Andersen, who was playing with Toronto, could never get out of the second round of the playoffs, right? Or excuse me, out of the first round of the playoffs, right? So he comes here, he gets out of the first, he gets into the second. Now he can't get us out of the conference final. So winning those big games and those big moments, I think, is something that Anderson always lacked. And Mrazek, he did great job. Antti Rata, great job. These are good goaltenders, right? But it always seemed like come to playoffs, man, we could really use that one big save to get us over the hump. So no longer having to worry about goaltending and locking up these two goaltenders long term, I think should be the top priority. for ET, and I think that if the Hurricanes are smart, that's really needs to be our first course of action, right? Is let's go ahead. We've got Nystrom signed, right, which I think was a great deal. But sticking with the goaltending right now, getting those two signed locked up long term. Now you know what you can do with the rest of your lineup and the rest of your roster because you're not having to look over your shoulder and say, "Ooh, is this goaltender available for $10 million? Ooh, is this goaltender available for trade for two first round picks? Oh, is this goaltender available for whatever?" Nope, goaltending is no longer an issue. You accept that maybe they're not the greatest tandem in the world as of today, but you know very well that they're able to come in and win games for us. And the hope is that if one of them starts slacking off a little bit, the other one can step up and take his place. Because two goaltenders that are both making $6 million is way better than one that he's making 12. Like Bobrovsky is a perfect example, right? Bobrovsky gets hurt. Who does Florida go to? Right? They don't even have Spencer Knight anymore, right? So that becomes like the question, right? Is a team like Florida who just won back-to-back cups on Bobrovsky's back? If he gets hurt, where does that leave them in goaltending? And so I believe that by going after Kochenkov and Bussi as a 1A, 1B tandem, giving them similar contracts, saying, all right, whoever wants the crease has to earn it. That gives us plenty of runway, gives us an ability to really come into let the rest of this team come into their own, knowing that we're not going to have to do something drastic at goaltending to make sure that we stop the bleeding there, right? So that's number one. So goaltending feeling good, looking good. That's huge for the Hurricanes, right? Next, let's talk about just the defense. So a couple different points I wanted to bring up and wanted to go over. Right. First is the contract with Nystrom. I think these last couple of games, mind you, this is being recorded Slavin's first game, so Sunday, right? So Nystrom's last couple of games that he played at the NHL level, he looked good. His skating looked real good. And it's, the defensive side of the puck is always hard to learn. It comes with experience. So it's not something that can just be taught. It's something that has to be experienced 100 different times for you to really pick up on, right? Anyone who knows anything about hockey knows the fact that defensemen come into their own at a later stage. Normally you're looking at 24, 25-ish is when defensemen really go from like, I'm still learning how to play to like, hey, I can actually come in here and command it. Now you will always have your 18 or occasional 18 or 19-year-old who can jump in and just instantly make a difference, like we see at the Islanders. But it's not something that's a consistent thing. So Nystrom being able to, he's gotten a lot of seasoning down the AHL. He now has a long-term contract for 4 years, I believe at 1.25. Hey, you got a home, buddy. We know where you're going to be. You're going to be playing for the Hurricanes, right? It's also, I believe, opens up the Hurricanes too. If they want to move someone else, if they want to move out a defenseman, now they can, knowing that Nystrom could be a 6-7 guy for us, right? Because remember, we do have a very, very at this point sort of log jam at defense at this point. So I feel like we're at a good point. We sort of kind of Slavin going down, honestly, and the Hurricanes remaining at such a high and still being where they are in the standings is about as good of a thing that could have happened to the Hurricanes, right? Because you see this occasionally happen with teams, right, where they get the injury bug and then you find out just how like there's so much lack of depth on that team, right? This is the complete opposite. What this is we sort of I had a sort of kind of a nagging feeling that the Hurricanes were okay at depth, but just seeing how good their defense has been and how good their offense has been as well. Now, doesn't mean I'm not going to complain when we've got some certain guys on the teams that are missing empty net goals, or who I think aren't contributing the way they should be, or if we have Taylor Hall in the fourth line and he's dragging them the best he can. But what it does mean is we're seeing that the depth is potentially there for a longer run now that we've got Slavin back, right? So something to keep in mind as we're having these conversations based on some of these previous videos that I've made, right? When you don't know what's going on with your lineup, when you don't know what's going on with your roster, there's a lot of question marks, right? So it comes down to a couple of games, right? It comes to seeing 2 or 3 games consistently where the fourth line is really being dominant and goals are getting capitalized on. It's seeing some secondary scoring for Hall and Courier and some of these other players that we haven't really seen a whole lot from this season. So once you see a couple of games where this happens, now it's a little easier to feel like relaxed. Like, okay, maybe they're just coming into their own. With Slavin back, I really feel like the defense is now sort of rounded out pretty well, right? And that maybe ends up being the bigger of all the stories that we have on defense is that with Slavin back in this first game back, he looked good. He looked solid. I think he ended up with about 17 minutes of ice time, and he looked phenomenal. And I'm glad that we didn't just throw him out there to the Wolves and give him like the 24, 25 minutes, especially with OT against Philly. We sort of kind of eased him into it, and he looked like he didn't skip a beat. So I'm hoping now that means by hopefully by next weekend he's back up to his regular regiment of time on the ice. But then the question is the lines is how what should the defensive pairings look like now that Slavin's back? Um, I sort of kind of feel like I would like to see Keandre Miller not paired up with Jacob Slavin because you whenever you're in the position like what we are, right? Slavin is at an age where he's if I'm not mistaken, he's pushing he's 29, 30-ish at this point in time, right? So he's still on the younger side. We're still going to get several more great years with Slavin, but I would much rather see Keandre Miller develop in his own way, in his own right. But more than likely, the two of them will end up on the same pairing. But I think I would like to see maybe Gothesbear and Slavin teamed up, not necessarily because um, Gothesbear needs help, like we've seen Slavin help out with numerous players over the years, right? But it's more or less because I want to see like Gothesbear come in and be able to sort of kind of focus a little bit more offensively on the puck. The great thing about Slavin that he's such a dominant defensive pairing on a 2-on-1. Most of us don't get that nervous. It's only until recently that we start getting nervous about a 2-on-1 going the other way if Slavin with Slavin not being on the ice ever. So I feel like with Slavin back in the lineup, 2-on-1s we can go back to resting a little bit, especially if Slavin's on the ice there with it, and it allows for Gothsbear to really focus in on being a little bit more offensive. Because I have this feeling that he's not necessarily playing conservatively. That wasn't be the right word. It would be he's not taking every opportunity that he can to jump into the play and make an extra pass. Because I feel like if you know that it's Walker, no offense to Walker or some of the other guys back there, even Nystrom, he's not one to always jump to the fullest extent that maybe he would if he was paired up with someone he felt comfortable with, right? So that being said, I do think that Walker and Miller is a great combination where you're wanting to find guys who can grow in these pairings together, right? The perfect example of that was Slavin playing with Pesci. Like they sort of kind of for the longest time that was the tandem, right? And I feel like that it works very well if you put two defensemen together, let them sort of kind of grow, understand each other's game, and for the future you can have 4 or 5 years of a solid number two tandem essentially, like second defensive pairing. I think that's really what the Hurricanes need. And then that being said, that puts Jalen Chatfield with Nishkinen, and I think that it's a pairing that's there's gonna be a filling out process. There's gonna be a little bit of trying to figure out how each other plays and what and how things need to go and whatnot. So you expect there to be it's what you would call a solid third line pairing, right? Eventually, you hope that Nishkinen makes a jump and is able to step into that first line role. But on being on the third line, he's not always gonna be getting the toughest defensive assignments, and he can focus a little bit more on the offensive side of his game as well. So I think that those are really the best combination of lines that the Hurricanes need to be pushing forward to be able to be successful. The last thing on the goaltending front that I really want to discuss was in the Saturday game against the Philadelphia Flyers, Michigan was benched after the second goal that the Flyers scored on bad pinch by Michigan. So I don't like that. I don't like that because I feel like this is the first time we've ever really seen player in the Hurricanes defensive system that's younger constantly be getting benched, right? So if it was Dougie Hamilton back when we had him years and years ago, he wasn't getting benched of this, and it happened all the damn time. It was obnoxious, right? We saw this with Pesci. We saw this a lot with Shea as well. Rarely, if ever, did we see that resulting in a benching, right? So I'm very concerned that we're sort of kind of going down this route because here's the thing, right? Michigan's only on a 1 year deal. You don't want to piss him off. You know what I mean? Because he could very easily head right back over to the KHL, or he can make your life a living hell when it comes to trying to re-sign him, or if you wanted to try to move him. So I think it's in the best interest of the Hurricanes to just understand he's a rookie. He's gonna make some knucklehead mistakes like we all did, and it's okay. You know, ideally you have a stern talking to him on what the hell moment, but you're not going to if you consistently bench him and he ends up wanting to go someplace else. the only person the Hurricanes can blame is themselves, because that's never how we treated any other player previous to Niskanen. So I'm not a fan of that. I think that if the Hurricanes really, that's not a path I would go down. And now trust me, I'm the type of person who does not mind benching someone, but every so often you do get a little bit of a diva who is a little bit of a superstar, who we know this guy's going to be great. Let's not like put a bad taste in everyone's mouth if like he ends up not, you know what I mean, if he ends up not becoming, like, let's not like ruin an opportunity over something silly like this. I don't think it's worth it. So that's the defense. Last up, let's go ahead. Well, we got let's talk special teams. Well, first I want to talk offense. So I think a lot of people are starting to see the issue we have with that first line. I saw a couple comments today, even on Facebook and on X, essentially saying that everyone started saying the same thing. Maybe Aho needs some competition at first line center, because it looks bad. It looks bad. I hate to say it. It looks bad. And I went back and I said this a couple of weeks ago that once I started talking about it, everyone's going to start noticing it, because like an occasional off pass from a decent player, it happens. It happens to every player. It happens to McDavid. It happens to Bedard. It happens to everybody, right? But when it's pretty consistent to the point that you're like, oh, Jarvis and Svetch are on the ice. Ooh, Aho, what was that? Because it wasn't Svetch. Svetch doesn't send that type of pass. Jarvis doesn't, because that pass what isn't nearly that off, right? So you sort of kind of we sort of saw this coming, and I feel like yeah, I feel like it's time for an honest conversation to start going to happen. Not necessarily like you can't bench him, right? You can't sit down and say to him, we're not going to trading him, but there has to be some type of conversation about it. You would think, right? Or maybe you do need to send him for a game. Maybe just having him take a little bit of time that says, hey man, look, like clearly something's going on. Clearly we're not driving the way we need to be driving. What do you need? Why don't you sit in the press box for a game, and then we'll just a little bit of a mental reset, and then we'll start this thing back up, because it's looked bad. And the other half of it is this: you cannot measure a player's worth solely on point production. You can't. If you did, Skinner would have never left, right? Skinner would have never left if we measured it solely on point production, because Skinner was always putting up points. The issue with Skinner was he didn't know how to play defense, and he would make horrible puck decisions that would always lead to turnovers going the opposite way. So I'm not necessarily comparing Aho to how bad Skinner was, but I occasionally am seeing plays that are very reminiscent of Skinner, very much a reminiscent of why did you send a blind pass through the neutral zone and defensive end? Why would you do that? And things like that, where that have me occasionally a little concerned of him just not taking care of the puck the way he needs to. That being said, Svechnikov has started to look a little bit better over the last couple of games. Jarvis has been absolute fire. The fact that he isn't a write-in for Team Canada is crazy to me. It really, truly is. You couldn't ask anything for more from that guy. And if you were to ask me, that's the next captain of the Carolina Hurricanes. That's exactly what you want from the Hurricanes. You want a hardworking player who has the talent, who has the mentality, who wants the attention. This is this is the captain. Please God, make this the next captain, right? No, not pushing Stahl out, not pushing Stahl to the side, none of that. What we're saying is Stahl has left a great legacy with the Hurricanes, and when his time does come for him to hang up the skates, we will all be sad. We will be excited. We hopefully he gets his number retired with the Hurricanes. But then the very next thing is we know who the next leader of this team is, because he's been doing it. When Slavin and Stahl were out for those couple of games, it felt like this was Jarvis's team and he was driving the bus. So pun, very punny. Um, but yeah, man. So I am excited for Jarvis. I think that Jarvis. Um, I made a bet with a buddy of mine that Jarvis could put up 40 goals, and right now Jarvis is looking. I mean, he's looking great. I think he will get 40 goals this season. Um, my biggest concern is he, he runs himself so ragged. So I'm wanting him to get on Team Canada, obviously, for the Olympics. What a great honor that would be for him. But part of me is also a little bit selfish in saying if he doesn't get on there, it's great for him to get a little bit of relaxation and rest because he like today we saw him go into the boards with that goal, trying to score a goal in overtime, which ended up leading to us getting power play. Right, he has given this team everything he has, and I think as a Hurricanes fan, that's the player I'm proud of the most. You know what I mean? Like Bussey's a great story, Slavin's great attitude, Stahl's is a great shutdown player. But you want to talk about what encompasses a Hurricane now in 2025, going into 2026, it's Seth Jarvis. And I really firmly believe the fact that like if the Hurricanes are smart, that's their next guy. We're talking 2 years down the road. He's going to have taken on more responsibility by that point in time. Whenever or not Slavin, Stalzy retires, I think that this is a match made in heaven for the Hurricanes to go ahead and when the time comes, when the time's right, promote this guy to the captain because he really truly deserves it. He encompasses what it means to be a Hurricane right now in 2026. So um, after that, right? So big shout out to Nikolai Ehlers, right? I think the first couple of weeks me doing this, I was pretty hard on him, thinking like, "Oh, dude, you just got a bag, and now you're being like, egg, my guy. What is going on?" And that second line, and feel free to like, comment, and let me know what you think on this, right? That second line, Stankoven, Ehlers, and Blake, that plays like a first line. That 100% plays like a first line right now. Like, tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm wrong that there isn't a little bit more comfort when you see Ehlers, Stankoven, and Blake jump over those boards than Aho right now, right? It's now mind you, it's close. I'm not saying it's like a huge swing over it's not a huge swing one way or another, but I feel like the way that's playing, Ehlers, he found whatever extra gear he was hoping to find. He found it. Um, Seeing him lead the charge, seeing him go from end to end, um, that's the biggest thing that the Hurricanes felt they sort of lost, right? When we got rid of Natchez, was that speed of going through the neutral zone and into the opposing team zone. And Ehlers has proven that he can also replicate. No, not mind you, not nearly as fast. And we can all be honest, there are probably 3 or 4 players tops that can match Natchez's speed. But being able to see him go into the neutral zone, Ehlers that is, and get around players the way he has, and draw in more defenders, which ends up leaving Stankoven and Blake open. That's a masterclass. It's wonderful to see because it's so important to the game. Is this the ability to sort of sometimes you need to move the puck quick. Sometimes you need to get into the opposing zone, and they call it north south hockey, which means just going straight up the ice, not looking for any detours. Just get it up, get into the zone, get it deep, and then start the forecheck. Right. So huge shout out to Ehlers on several good games, a couple of goals through the course. I believe he had one. I think I'm pretty sure he had one against Philly and he had one against the Capitals. So he's really come into his own. Um, the second line right now, like I said, it plays like a first line. It really does, and I think that line is going to be something special for the Hurricanes, especially with all 3 of those players locked up 5 or 6 years. I think that you sort of kind of let that be the line. Let that line go into the sunset together, if you will. Meaning like they're always going to be a line who's going to be together. There are going to be some highs, there are going to be some lows, there are going to be some days that it doesn't look so great, but that they play well together. They're crafty, and I think right now it's a weird type of line if you think about it. Right, you've got 2 players that are under 5'10", and then even Nikolai Ehlers is 6 foot. So it's like it's not a standard normal line to have to go against. You've got to think your average line. Your average line. Look at perfect example um, is to look at the first line. Especially being at 6'1" ish, 6'2" ish, right? I think he's like maybe 6 foot, 6'1". You got Aho at 5'11", Jarvis at 5, I think 5'10", right? So that's a sort of kind of like a little bit of an undersized line, but it makes sense, right? You got 2 players who are hovering at like 5'8", 5'9", and then barely a 6 foot guy. It's a vastly different game because like they're avoiding the boards altogether. Now, will they go into the boards? Sure, 100%. But they're wanting the middle of the ice. They're playing to the middle of the ice, right? So when they get on that forecheck, because of their rambunctious nature and their ability just to dig and dig and dig, that's how they get the scoring chances to start with because they're literally under the person trying being able to dig this out and then working it back to the D. It really is a complete mastercraft. Like if you really pay attention to how they do it, when they are able to be in those 50-50 board battles and like have the step that they need, meaning this is what I mean by this, right? So because we talked about 50-50 board battles before, especially when it comes to like power play. So in the power play unit, when a save is made to the goaltender and the deflection and the rebound goes to the boards, the expectation is sort of that the defense is going to be the first one there, right? And with that, all he has to do is chip it over the defense in the blue line, and he's good, right? But on regular 5-on-5 play, that's not the case because if he does that, it's guess what? Icing. So what this allows for the Hurricanes to do is those defensemen, because uh, Blake and Stankoven are so undersized, what this actually allows to happen is quite it's quite genius, honestly. Those defensemen have to take an extra second to look for the pass, or it's going to end up being an icing call back on their end. So when they take that extra second, that is when those guys are really coming in, picking up the puck, and being able to distribute it either to one another or to the defense. And once it's distributed to the defense, they're able to set themselves up and start a rotation and start getting opportunities to score. So I think that formula, that format, is a great format for a line. At first, I was a little bit nervous about it, just based on how undersized they are. And if they go to the playoffs, there will be teams that they match up against. It's just not going to work, right? But but this is the importance of solving the issue with the first line. Is that or your Jarvis, Aho, Svechnikov, right? Is once that line is worked out its kinks and is figured out, how much more easier is it? How much easier of a time is it going to be for Stankoven in line two to come in and do what they need to do? Right? The biggest issue we have right now is it really feels like some nights it's one line on, some nights it's the other line that's on, some nights it's Ehlers who's just going or Jarvis who's just going. So it's hard to get into a rhythm, right? When it's only one player going off on each line. So I feel like right now, as the Hurricanes have played these games and are steadily improving on some aspects, right? This is where the Hurricanes can really start to like build on it, right? And that, you always hear that a lot, especially when it comes to like we get to like quarter of the way through the season to like halfway through the season. They're building a season for themselves. They're building an ability to work together, right? So we're sort of kind of really starting to see that with this last week, and especially like I said, the biggest deal with these last four games is that they were all against Metropolitan Division opponents. So we pushed down Columbus a little further. So we made sure we caught up to the Capitals, and then we pushed down the Flyers and Capitals even more, both of them. So from the forward side of things, that is what's sort of kind of been fantastic. Special teams is sort of still a little extra special, if you know what I mean. So like we're getting some highs, we're getting some lows with it. Stahl, I think, still continuing to be on the big man in front is great. That being said, we need to see more from Aho in the faceoff circle. He's winning some here and there, and I get it, but like how do I want to put this, right? When I was growing up, I'll put it to you maybe in the form of a story, right? When I was growing up, you could still go to the Hurricanes practices at back then PNC Arena, and you could just watch the Hurricanes practice, right? It was growing up during that time frame was great. It was amazing. So as a 5'9" ish, 10-ish player, I learned how to take faceoffs myself from watching Rob Brind'Amour take them in practices. And then when he became a coach, watching how he was showing players to do it and how big, how wide their stance is, how much they were digging in. Jordan Stahl and the way he digs in is how everyone should do it. Honest to God, if you aren't below this guy, if you aren't really low to the ground when they're dropping that puck, you're going to have issues, right? So seeing them sort of kind of so there isn't the excuse when you've got Jordan Stahl and Rob Brind'Amour on the same team, right? With Brind'Amour coaching, because we know he knows how to teach winning faceoffs. We know that Jordan Stahl is a successful player, faceoff guy. So the question becomes, why aren't they being used as resources? Why is a pretty good player not able to figure out a fundamental part of the game? Now, look, if you don't want to play center, that's fine. Let us know. I think Jarvis would actually be a great center, to be honest with you. I think Jarvis would be a phenomenal center. Um, but that's just my opinion. But Aho Nee has got to be able to figure this part of the game out if we're going to end up ever winning a Stanley Cup, which is at the end of the day the goal here, right? Is it's not just to have a good team that makes the playoffs, which is what the Hurricanes will be, I think, for the next 10ish years, right? I think I'm going to say we're going to be one of the teams that is competing for the longest playoff streak here shortly. I'm very confident in that because the goaltending situation looks like it's been rectified, right? With Bussi really starting to come in his own. Mind you, next week he hits the bed and the two could completely change. But as of this week, he looks amazing. He looks like I would sign him to that contract knowing that we've got what I think is the right guy. Because you know what I mean. Like at the end of the day, if you have the right player, and occasionally these goaltenders are human beings. They're gonna run into bad streaks. I think that you go with Bussi. I think that I feel comfortable enough going with Bussi and Kochenkov as my 1A 1B. Um, but anyway, guys, so that's the episode. So this is my little studio. It's quiet, it's quaint. So living in Volcano, Big Island. So, um, but anyway, guys, I appreciate you guys tuning in and watching. Have a good one. Go Canes.